First, the guards heard a scraping sound, thin as claws on stone. Then a moan, trembling, as if born not from the throat, but from the stone itself. The ancient Saint-Auguste tower, blinded by moss and mold, echoed hollowly. It was 4 o'clock in the morning. None of the guards dared to climb the narrow staircase. Marguerite Delort, the youngest daughter of the Duke of Nevers, had been held there since she was 11. Her face was rarely seen, even as a child. Chronicles claimed that at birth she had a bluish tinge to her skin, and by the age of 5, the girl spoke with the voice of an old nun who had died on the night she was born. Rumors spread at court that she was a vessel of damnation, an echo of an old heresy, retribution for the witches burned on the hills. Her mother died of a fever a month after giving birth, and her father, Duke Laurent, ordered his daughter to be walled up in the South Tower, in a windowless room with a small opening for food, under the supervision of 2 silent servants. 12 years passed. For the last 6 months, the guards had avoided looking through the crack. The servants who brought her food complained of the smell. The diaries of the Notre-Dame-de-Puy monastery contain the following entry. On hot days, a stench rising from the tower reeks of swamp and sulfur. One of the brothers who approached felt nauseous and bit off his fingernails in a delirium. The local monks claimed that it was not flesh decomposing, but sin that had been locked away for too long. Rumors reached the court. The Bishop of Lyon demanded an explanation. King Francis himself ordered a doctor to be sent to the tower once a season, but everyone who climbed into Margaret's cell either died or disappeared. One, Master Augustin, an anatomist from Besançon, left a diary found in rags on the banks of the Loire. In it was written, "Her skin cracks like a holy relic sealed in resin. The veins, visible through the thinnest layer, look like worms crawling of their own accord. And her voice is not the voice of a girl. It is the murmur of a forgotten name." After this sentence, the ink breaks off and the edges of the page are burnt. From the end of August, the dome of the tower began to glow, not brightly, but dimly, like rotting wood or the moldy glow of the moon. At night it pulsated, and below, in the windows of the castle, the glass shattered. Duke Laurent, by then immobilized by paralysis, screamed at night, tearing the words, "Not me, it's that damned whore, it's not my blood," from his throat. His court chaplain, Father Germain, wrote in a report to the Archbishop of Reims, "The Duke hears his daughter's voice calling him to confession, but he is unable to go. He vomited blood on the night of Saint Roch. The Duke's illness worsened. The room smelled of ozone and rotten eggs. The court physician refused to touch the Duke's body, saying, 'I can feel that his skin is already dead, even though he is still breathing.' Laurent howled in pain, demanding that his entrails be cut out, and when he was refused, he fell into a stupor and began to pray, staring his nails on the armrests. That same night, 2 guards standing by the tower disappeared. They were not found. A black trail was discovered on the floor at the entrance. Not blood, but something resembling slime. The trail was circled with salt. None of the remaining guards knew who had done it. The servants claimed that there was a knocking sound coming from inside the tower, as if someone were walking barefoot on stone. But Marguerite was 23, and everyone was sure that she could no longer stand. The last person to see her, Brother Armand from the Abbey of La Bronne, wrote, "Her thighs were rotten, she crawled on her elbows, but she still sang. Her voice was like a choir singing backwards." In the fall, a decree came from the Archbishop. The tower was to be opened immediately, and the body, dead or alive, was to be taken away for a church investigation. The Duke was in agony. He trembled, struggled, tried to crawl to the stairs, begging his servants not to open the door. The day before the opening, he died, spewing a clot of pus and black slime from his mouth. His eyes remained open, his pupils completely white. A mark was found on his tongue, tiny but distinct, like the imprint of a baby's tooth. When the lock was removed from the tower door in the morning, there was no cry, only silence, absolute, suffocating. One of the monks lost consciousness, another was blinded. Opening the door, they saw that the walls were covered with writing in a non-human script. Marguerite herself was sitting in the corner, naked. Her eyes were closed. A glow emanated from her body, steady, like a firefly. Her entrails hung from her stomach, as if she had pulled them out herself, but she was still alive. Of the 3 who entered the tower, only 2 survived. The first, a novice from Orleans, was completely blinded and died of fever 2 days later. The second, the Archbishop's notary, raved, screaming that he had seen not a woman, but the embodiment of fallen light. His mouth had to be sewn shut. He was biting his tongue, saying that she was inside and she was with him. The third, Brother Thibault, managed to get out. His report was preserved in the diocesan papers and was later classified. It says, "She did not eat. Her bones are tightly covered with skin, but there are no sores or signs of decay. Her face is calm, but her lips are cracked. Her fingers are like those of a baby. Her eyelids are covered with a film. A faint light stands above her. It is not a candle or a fire. It is like the light of insects in the forest in summer, but it casts no shadow. The air around her is like before a storm. The stench of death is gone, only fear remains." Margarita's body did not decay, but it did not live either. The royal court physicians, who arrived on orders from Paris, described her as an indeterminate creature in a state of death without cessation of functions. There was no pulse, no breathing either, but her pupils contracted in the light. Touching her skin, one of the doctors cried out. She was ice cold, but burning. A thick scar was found on her back, smooth as if from a stitched incision. When they opened the scar, they found emptiness. There were no internal organs, only a black film stretching to the spine, as if some kind of matter was holding the body together. Margarita was carried out of the tower on the 3rd day. Her body was placed in an oak sarcophagus, lined with lead. The Archbishop's report stated, "Do not allow commoners to touch her. Do not bury her until further notice." She was taken to the Abbey of Saint Louis in the north, to a walled crypt under an old chapel, where no human foot had set foot since the time of the plague. But the story did not end there. On the night of the transfer, one horse died, another went blind, and a third began to vomit. 2 of the drivers disappeared, and the third fell into a stupor, and later died in the monastery infirmary. Those who accompanied the procession complained of the unseasonably cold weather. The candles went out by themselves, and the monk walking in front with a cross described hearing a woman's whisper asking, "Why are you turning away?" The next day, the plague broke out in the duchy, suddenly, without warning. The first to fall ill were those who lived near the tower, then the cooks, servants, and scribes. On the 5th day, the Bishop of Chalon fell ill. On the 6th, the Duke's youngest son died, whose eye had burst the day before his death. Officially, the epidemic was called autumn fever, but the monastery chronicles wrote, "It is not fever, but punishment. It is not a disease, but a call." The sarcophagus containing Margaret's body was opened twice more. The first time was on the orders of the new Duke, Laurent's son, to confirm his sister's death. He was convinced that she was still alive, for at night, knocks could be heard in the castle, the same knocks that had once come from the tower. Upon opening the coffin, the body was found in a different position than when it had been laid to rest. Her hands were clasped on her chest, whereas they had originally been lying along her body. A dark mark appeared on her wrist, like a burn. A thick, dark liquid, viscous, and smelling of burning, flowed from her mouth. After the examination, the Duke began to fever. He went blind, his skin became covered with spots, and on the 4th day, he died. The second autopsy was conducted in secret. It was initiated by a papal emissary sent to Lyon at the request of the royal chancellery. He disappeared. All that remained of him was a note. She cannot be kept in the ground. She cannot be kept in the air. She is in between. There was no signature. The chronicle of the monastery of Saint-Lô records. In those days, the light inside the crypt pulsated. The shadows in the cells did not move with the sun. One of the brothers burst into tears when he heard his name from inside the crypt. And then there was silence. 3 days after this incident, the abbey was closed. All the monks were transferred to Limoges. The chapel was sealed with lead, and the entrance was covered with earth and salt. Nevertheless, a year later, a girl was born in a local village with white pupils and a voice reminiscent of a nun. The family was accused of having ties to the devil. The mother was burned, and the child was drowned. But the Inquisition records note, before her death, the infant said, "The tower is still standing." In the spring of that same year, when the Duke's tower was finally dismantled by order of the regent, an event took place in the Cathedral of Neufchâtel that would later be called the Silent Funeral. 5 singers, performing the morning mass, froze on a single chord. According to eyewitnesses, the choir sounded unhuman, as if someone behind them had finished the phrase for them. In a woman's voice, smooth, as if not from the throat, but from inside the walls. For a moment, the air in the upper gallery lit up, and the arches trembled. One of the singers later confessed, "We didn't know whose soul we were burying, but we felt that the body was still there." During those same days, the diary of an old servant, a certain Janet from Burgundy, who had once cared for Marguerite's mother, was found in the archives of the ducal house. The diary reads, "Marguerite was born in blood. Her mother lost consciousness when the contractions began. The baby was delivered, but the midwife screamed. There was light in the baby's eyes, not a glare, not a will-o'-the-wisp, but an even glow like iron in a forge. Since then, the girl has not slept at night. She stared at the wall and whispered as if she heard an answer. And when she was 7, she strangled a mouse and said that it wasn't suffering because now it would have a voice." Several lines were crossed out, and next to them, another scribe added, "Do not disclose. Order of the Chancellor. Send to the tower until further investigation." A year later, disappearances began in the surrounding villages. Children under the age of 5 were vanishing. One of the records of a notary from Belfort states that the bodies were not found, but the parents began having the same dreams. They heard someone calling their child's name and demanding that the door be opened. One woman, whose son was taken away at night, had a vision of the boy standing behind a wall and whispering, "I'm with her. She promised we'd come back." The church launched an investigation, but soon the bishop was replaced, the old inquisitor was recalled, and all documents were classified. All that remained were the personal notes of one of the investigating brothers. All we understand is that this is not death, it is detention. Who is holding her is unknown, but if she gets out, the sky will fall. The last person who dared to speak about Margarita was a wandering monk named John of Beauvais. He claimed that in his youth he had served in the tower and saw the girl pull shadows out of the mirror. He was caught, convicted of heresy, and sentenced to be burned at the stake. Before his execution, he shouted, "She is no longer down there. She is inside all of you. Look into the eyes of your daughters." He was burned at the stake in Libourne, but as recorded in the city report, the smoke did not rise. It spread across the ground, and several witnesses began to bleed from their noses. 3 years later, there were no direct heirs left in the ducal family. The castle was sold, and a chapel was built on the site of the former tower. However, at night, symbols resembling burns appear on its walls. Once a year, candles go out there, and the smell of burning and iron appears. Locals avoid the place, saying, "The one who was not buried is shining there." The story of Margaret, the cursed daughter of the Duke, did not end with her death. If indeed she died, there are too many rumors, too many coincidences. The archives are silent, but the walls of the tower remember longer than the walls of the castle. When candles were lit for the last time in the Cathedral of Tours, in memory of the Duchess, the flames went out before the end of the liturgy. The bishop, who had hurried to perform the funeral service on behalf of the royal chancellery, later wrote in his report, "The words would not stay on my tongue, as if the air itself prevented me from finishing. Something nearby prevents the name of Margaret from being uttered." This was the last official attempt to acknowledge her existence. The ashes, allegedly extracted from the collapsed tower, were never examined. The servants sent to collect the remains fell ill one after another with a strange fever, and their skin cracked and, according to the doctors, their eyes lost their ability to recognize. None of them were later able to describe what they had seen below. One, before his death, whispered, "There are no ashes there. There is light. It was waiting to be touched." An entry from the monastery in Cluny, made a year later, reads, "On the night of the 13th to the 14th, a girl's figure was seen in the south gallery, not touching the ground. Her face is hidden, but her hair is dark and tangled. Steam rose from her eyes. She did not speak. When people approached her, the air around her became sticky. A few weeks later, the monastery burned down. The cause of the fire remained unknown, but the Archbishop of Lyon ordered that the rubble should not be cleared by hand, and that psalms should not be read at the place where the vault collapsed. It was said that Marguerite's spirit did not dwell in her body, but in an idea, in the memory of fear, in prohibitions, in the whispers of mothers who kept their daughters away from mirrors on the night of the full moon. A banned medical treatise on dead light, found in the basement of the university library in Dijon, claims that attempts were made to treat the girl with bloodletting and opium, but all that was achieved was a temporary descent into inert silence. The body refused to decay. The temperature in her cell remained stable. Even when it was freezing outside, her skin did not wrinkle. Her nails grew. One of the notes left by an anonymous scribe in the cellars of Troy reads, "They thought they had imprisoned flesh, but it was not flesh. It had long since been freed. They did not shut her out from the world. They shut the world out from her." A decade later, when an epidemic of child madness broke out in Burgundy, dreams in which babies beat themselves in the face and whispered, "She's coming." The old priests remembered the tower, but no one dared to speak its name in letters found. When the dead abbot's archives were unpacked, it was replaced with blank spaces. She, the one who, the figure. The name had been erased not only from the records, but also from people's minds. The ducal family died out completely. The last descendant, a boy named Etienne, threw himself from the bell tower at the age of 9. Before doing so, he said to his nurse, "I can hear her calling me. I am her brother. I must not live." After his death, the tower was never mentioned again. Only in oral tradition did nighttime legends survive. Beggars selling talismans against the light, mothers covering mirrors on the night of the full moon, nuns refusing to baptize babies by candlelight, and among them, whispers, "The cursed daughter is still watching, not with her eyes, but from within. And if you hear a voice behind you, don't turn around. There is light there, but it is not for you." Thus ended a story that was never officially begun. It is not mentioned directly by any king, any council, or any chronicle, but the fear of it outlived everyone, and remained like a mark on a wall that has been torn down, but whose smell lingers.